Hi everyone, welcome to today's session. Now that we have been working on microservices and we managed to have the communication between our employee service and the department service, we will have to do the deployment of these two services in Kubernetes using the local cluster of Minikube. And in this case, we are going to see how then can we be able to configure these two services to be able to communicate within the Minikube environment. So to get started, we are just going to first publish or upload our images, our Docker images to Docker Hub. And then from there, we'll be able to create the deployment for our department service and employee service. And these together, we'll be able to also create the MySQL which will be used within the Kubernetes cluster. So that's all that we are going to do for today, and for this particular session, let's get started. Alright, now the first thing that we're going to do is we need to confirm that for each of our microservices, we have the Google Cloud Jeep plugin enabled, and in this case, we are going to publish this particular into the registry of Docker Hub. And I'm going to make use of the artifact ID, which is going to be the employee service and the project version. And in this case, the project version is going to be version 1.00. And in this case, we are going to have the artifact ID as the employee service. So it's going to be given as 1.00 as the employee version for this case. Then the same thing, we need to confirm that within the department service, we have the same configured. And in this case, you can see on the department service, we added the Jacoco plugin for us to be able to get the test coverage. So what we're going to do, the same plugin should be configured on the department service. So the first thing that we're going to do is ideally package this application. So I'm going just to start with this one using Maven clean package, Jeep build, and I'm going just for now to skip tests. So I'm going just to make use of the skip tests. I don't want any test to be run to set it to true. So for now, so that we can be able to fast track our deployment. All right. So this one is going to package the application without running the tests, and in this case, we be able to have our image pushed to Docker Hub with the latest changes. All right. As you can see, the image is being built and it's being pushed to Docker Hub. Right, 75% complete and it's 91% complete. So this is build success. Will be able to be an indicator of the successful push of the image. Now let's go and do the same on the department service. I might just also copy this command, go to my department service and paste the same thing. Alright, so it's almost complete. So you can see we have a build success for our department service, and you can see that this is the URL to our registry.docker hub or John and department service 1.0. So we are going to create the deployment for this one. So from our first sessions that we were dealing with the employee service, we had created some files to do with Kubernetes. So I'm going just to open a couple and just walk you through. So the first thing that we did was to configure the cluster config map. And this particular config map is going to hold the employee database name. And now, in addition to this one, we are going to have to use the other database name for the department service. So I'm going just to add another key, which is going to be the department database name, and this one is going to be department. All right. So I'm going just to have that as the new database. So we'll be making use of the same MySQL. So this case, we are going to make use of the first instance of MySQL host and port. That's all the updates that I need to make on this particular cluster config map. On the config secret, I'm going to make use of the same username and password. So we'll be referring to this base64 encoded username and password. And then from there, we have the deployment for the employee deployment. Now I'm going to walk you through the MySQL stateful set. And this particular stateful set is actually coming up with the persistence volume. So we are going to demand for this particular persistence volume PV. And for that, we are going to have this one created within this particular path. So what I'm going to do here is just going to make use of this one, and I'm going to update a little bit this one to be, let's say, MySQL /data. That's, I'm going just to retain it that way. Then for that, we'll be able to claim that persistence storage by using a persistence volume claim. All right, so this one will be requesting for 1 GB of memory for this particular file system. All right, now the next thing that we're going to do, we are going to deploy MySQL as a stateful set, which is going to be the MySQL stateful set. In this case, the service name is going to be MySQL. And then from there, we specify the image of MySQL latest, and we'll be running the container or the pod on exposing that particular port on that 306. And now in regard to MySQL root password, we are going to refer to the cluster secret, which is created within the cluster secret YAML file, and we are going to refer to the key, which is MySQL root password. Then for the database, we are going to have the default database created, which is going to be the employee database. So we are going to have that being created as the first database, but then the rest we'll be able to create within we'll be logging into the MySQL database and create that particular database once this particular database is up. But then in the future tutorial, I'll be able to show you how you can be able to inject the initialization file, which is init.sql, and map it to this particular volume so that you can be able to create the databases that we require. Then for this case, for stateful application, we need to persist data within a current Docker pod or within a session. So in this case, we are making use of the persistence volume storage, and in this case we are referring to the volume that we claimed, which is MySQL PVC. Then from there, we are exposing an internal service, which is headless service, which will be able to be used to communicate within the network of Kubernetes. So we'll be able to make use of this to communicate. And now, whenever we expose this service, it's going to be a stateful application. So in that case, we are going to make use of MySQL pod 1 and referring to the service name known as MySQL. And so that's an overview of how we are going to deploy this. So for that, before we go too far, let's just run these particular files and confirm that they're actually working. Right, so let me open my terminal. Right, so I'm going just to go to this terminal here. So I'm going to cd k8. Alright, so from here I'm going to make use of Minikube start. As you can see, I've already started my Minikube. So let me just show you. You just need to write the command. Let me delete this one also. So we need just to have Minikube start, right? So this one will be able to start the local cluster, all right, and make it available. All right, so our Minikube cluster has been started. So if I just make use of kubectl, so you're going to make use of kubectl command get pods. As you can see, we don't have any pod running. So what we need to do is apply this particular file. So I'm going just to go one level up, which is going to be cd one level up, and I'm going just to say kubectl apply. And I'm going to apply which file within the K8s folder. So I'm going just to apply all those files, and you can see that now everything has been created. Now let's see all these resources, how they have been created. So I'm going just to say Minikube dashboard. So I'm going just to open the UI of this one. So dashboard. And now this one will be able to start the dashboard, whereby you can be able to see all our resources. So as you can see that there's some pods which are running, and in this case you can see that MySQL version 1 is running. And then now let's see our deployment. The employee service is not running. So what we can do is we can check on the events. So you can see it's trying to come up. All right. So those are our ports. You can be able to see this is our ports. And you can see that already that is actually running. So let's see some few logs. So I'm going just to go again, open this one, integrated terminal, and then cd one level up. I'm going just to say kubectl get port. I'm going just to see, you can see that now our employee service is actually running. So let's see some logs. So kubectl logs -f, and then we are going to have that. So you can see that our application is actually started on port 80, and then we have the actuator endpoint exposed. And you can see that it was able to connect to MySQL. That's why you can see that it's able to ensure that we have a connection to the MySQL. Now let's see the logs for MySQL. So this one we are going to get port, and then we are going to make use of logs, and then we are going to give the port name. And this case is going to be MySQL 0. Right? So you can see that all that is up and running. So if we wanted to see what are the different kind of databases that are available, so I'm going to do, so in just to say kubectl exec -it, and it's going to be that port, and then we are going to have bin/bash. So I'm going just to have that. So you can see that we have been able to exec, and this in this case we are going just to have that. So for now we are going to make use of MySQL -u root -p. So going to be my generic password. So I'm going to have generic. Right, so I need to do it once again, and this one is going to be generic. So generic. Right, so you can see that I'm able to log into the MySQL. So let me see, show databases. So I'm going just to show the databases that are here. You can see that I have, at the moment I have the employee database. So let me create the database for the department. So I'm going just to say create a database department. Right, so I'm going just to create this particular database. That's all that I need for the next service. So all that done and said, now we can do the deployment file for our employee service. So one thing that you need to be aware of, our employee service is going to be much or similar to our department. Our department service is going to be much or similar to the employee deployment. So what I'm going to do is just copy this one and paste it down, and I'm going to rename this one to department deployment. Right, so I'm going just to rename this one to department deployment. Right, so that's all that I need to do here. Now whenever we have an employee, I'm going just to replace this one with department. Alright, so I'm going just to have that replaced, and you can see that everything else, so the department is being replaced. So we have the deployment name being department, the app selector is going to be department, the selector, the merge labels for the ports is going to be department, and looking down on the template, you can see that this is the merge, which should be same as the selector label, merge labels, so department. Now you can see that at the same time on the image, I'm going to deploy the image of Oenga Department Service 1.0.0. So the request, I'm going just to allow it to request for 512 memory, and then the actuator endpoint. Now here is where you need to make a few changes. In that our department service, when we are running it locally, we had to change a port information to 881. To be able to give room for the employee service to run on port 880. So what we're going to do here is that we are going to make use of, change this particular actuator endpoint to port 81. Alright, 881. Then the MySQL host, we are going to refer to the MySQL database host. Alright, and then the next thing that we are going to do, on the database name, we are going to refer to the department database name, which is in the config cluster config map. We make use of the config map reference. Then the MySQL port, we are going to also refer to the cluster config map, which is going to be MySQL database port. Then the DB username, we are going to make use of the same MySQL root username from the secret reference, key reference. And then also the password, we are going to make use of the cluster secret key reference of MySQL root password. Now the port which is exposed, our container is going to run on port 8081. So we need to ensure that that is correctly given here. Right, now the next thing that we're going to do, we are going to have an internal service which is going to be API service, which is going to be the department LB. This is going to expose our traffic, so we are going to make use of a load balancer IB to expose our department service. So in this case, what you're going to do is going to have a load balancer service, which is going to run on port 8080, but then the target port here has to change. We are going to target ports which are running on port 8081. All right, so we need to have that as port 8081. Now, the other thing, as you can see, here we are exposing a load balancer. But then remember that our employee service needs to make the call internally to this particular department service. So that means we are going to expose an additional service, which is going to be a cluster service. So I'm going just to duplicate down here. I'm going just to have another service, or maybe I can have it up before. So I'm going just to add this additional port service here, which will be used now to communicate internally. So the first thing I'm going to do is just K8 service. So I'm going just to make use of K8 service, and in this case I'm going just to have it as employee department. So we are going to have department SVC. So this is going to be internal service, and in this case we are going to select apps which are in the label, having the label not department SFC but then department. Right, so we need to make that fix here. And then this one is going to be a cluster IP, meaning it's an internal service, and then we are going to target the port 8081. Right, so in this case we are going to target port 8081, and at the same time we are going to expose port 80. Right, so I'm going to remove the node port for this case. Alright, so that's all that we need to have in this case to have the internal service. Now, this particular internal service, we can be able now to make use of HTTP department SFC, and then we make the call. So we are going to make some adjustment on our employee service on how it's going to obtain the URL of the department service. Now, let's first start this particular application, and once it's started, now we can be able to make the call. So remember that that's all that we need to configure. It's just more or less similar to the employee deployment. So if you haven't seen our videos for Kubernetes from the start, you can rewatch my series on the first videos to be able to get hold of what we did on this particular configuration with regard to the deployment of services in Kubernetes. So that's all that we need. Now let's just again go to our K8, so cd K8. Then I'm going to do kubectl. So I'm not going actually to cd back one level up. I'm going to do kubectl apply -f K8. So it's going to read all the files within K8, and you can see that now our deployment has been created, our department SFC has been created, and then the LB has been created. Let's wait and check within the deployments. As you can see now, the deployment is being created, but then we can be able to check the status kubectl get pod. You can see that this one is creating, and then now we can be able to see what is happening on this particular pod. So what we're going to do is we're going to make use of kubectl describe pod, and in this case the pod name. So I'm going just to describe that. As you can see that it has successfully assigned this one, scheduled that, it's pulling the image for department service, so we can give it a few to complete. Alright, so let's go again. Describe the pod. As you can see that now they created container department and then started container. department. Now let's see the logs. So you can see the logs of this one. So you need to do kubectl logs. So you're going to do the kubectl logs -f and then -f and then department services. So you can see it's starting. Now let's wait for it to see what is happening, right, on the logs. Alright, so looking at the logs, you can see that it's trying to connect to a database known as department DB, right? And this particular department DB doesn't seem to exist. So let's just confirm. What did we create? We created the department DB, but then in terms of our reference variable, we are referring to the department DB name. So this is the value that we need to pick and come here under our deployment under the database MySQL DB name. We are going to make use of which is the department DB name. So we are going to replace this one with this key with department DB underscore name, and we are going to have this particular department database name, which should be coming from our cluster config map. So if I search this one, you can see that now our department database name should be department, right? So it should be able to pick now this value. So let's go again and apply the configuration. All right, so let me do again. I might just to right, so we apply the file and you can be able to see that now the department has been configured. Now let's do again and check what is happening. Logs get port. You can see that now this particular department is being created now this 11 seconds ago. So you can leave this one out so that it will be able to be removed automatically. So we are going to do logs again for this one. So let's see. This one, hope we should be able to connect now. The department. Alright, you can see Ikari started completed. And I hope now it's able to get the connection, create the database and everything else. So you can see that has been applied. Now let's confirm that it's actually running. Yes. Right, here we go. It's running on port 8081. Now, how then do we access? Now, the next question is that we have these particular services within the cluster, but then how then can we be able to access and invoke the request? So that's the next thing that we need to do. And now to do that, we are going to close this. Now, we need to expose these LB services here. So we need to come here to the service. So we need to expose our LB services. For this case, we have the department LB. So we need to start this service, and then also for the employee service, we need to also start the load balancer, right? So that we can be able to get the IPs assigned to it. So if we want to see the services, so we are going to do Minikube service lists. So we're going to list all the services. Alright, so you can see that we have the services, but then you can see that they are not assigned. So what I'm going to do, you can see that we have these default services: MySQL, Kubernetes, employee LB, department SFC, and department LB. So we want to have this one which is listening to department port 88 and employee LB. So we are going to make use of these two to expose. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is going to be Minikube service, and then I'm going to have the department LB, paste it here. Then I'm going to duplicate the terminal. You can see that it's been given. Now we're able to access our application, and this is the URI, right? Now let me duplicate this terminal here so that you can be able to see, and then I'm going to do again Minikube service list. And then we are going to start our other service, which is going to be the employee service. So in this case, I'm going to do employee LB. So employee -LB. Right. So you can see that also this one has been started on port that. So you can see this one has the default handler, which is no static resource on the context path. Right. Now let's check our actuator endpoint. So you can be able to go to actuator/ health. So we're going to check the health status. You can see that its status is up for this one. Now that is for the department service. Then let's do the same for our employee service. You can see that everything is up and running, right? So that's it. Now let's see how we can be able to create using our REST endpoint that we defined in these two services to create some data within that. So I'm going to go to the employee REST endpoint, and now instead of localhost, I'm going just to copy this IP for employee. I'm going to copy this host, which is 127, and have that on that port. Alright, so I'm going just to a bit replace that for now. And then with this, we can be able to make now the call. So let me just send the request. And you can be able to see that I should be able to automatically, let me see, it's HTTP. Sorry, I needed to have correct HTTP endpoint, send request. And this is on which one? This is on the department service. So I needed to make this call. This URL should be the one for the employee service, which should be this one. So I need just to replace this host with that, and let me just minimize this side. Right, now you can see that this is where the employee service is running. Now if I send this request, you can see that I'm able to create the first employee. Maybe send this one to another. Okay, so you can see here this is female. So let me just create Gladys Ado, and then we are going to change this one to 2021, and then maybe she was born on 98. Right, so let me send that, and then now let's see list all the employees. You can see this is coming from Kubernetes, Minikube, and in this case you can see that we have two data. Then let's see get employee by ID 2. You can see that we are able to get Gladys Do, and you can see that everything else remains the same. So that's how we expose. Now let's see how do we then get the list of departments. So let me just open the terminal a little bit, and we'll be able to see what happens in this case, whereby we know that the employee service needs to communicate to the department service. So to do this, we're going to do kubectl get port, and then for this case we are going to see the logs for the employee service. So in this case we are going to do kubectl logs -f, and then we are going to have this employee service. You can see what that we have been doing is being given here. Right, now let me clear the terminal and send something. Right, let me clear the terminal, and now let me make this call, whereby we know that we need to make the call to the department service. Right, now send that request. You can see that now it's unable to fail to convert the value type of string to the required type of integer for input with the department. Now what happened? Now that's the question, what happened? Now we have an exception, method argument mismatch. Right, that's because we are unable to get hold of the department service. Then now we need to make a few adjustments within our employee service to make use of a variable that we can be able to refer and override it within the deployment of the employee service. Now let's see, where are we making that call? We come here to our service, employee service, and down here you can see we are making the call at what point? Where are we specifying the URL? We are specifying the URL at this point. Right, so this is the host. Right, now let me show you something. We need to make this call to this point. Right, now let me pick one from here, whereby we are getting the department. I'm going to show you how you can be able to confirm the service that we expose that is actually being able to make that call. So let's just do again. We are into now instead of logs, we are going to do exec the pod name, and then we are going to do bash. Right, sorry, bin slash we need exec -it, and then bash. I think that's all that we need to do. It, this should be no space. Right, now we are within the employee service. Now let's see if we go to our Minikube service list. So let's just see the list of services that we have, and in this case you'll be able to see that we exposed a department SFC. So let's confirm how we can be able to make this call. So what I'm going to do is going to be curl, and let me see whether we have curl. Yeah, we have curl. So we are going to curl this request. So curl the request VVV, and then we are going to do what? We're going to do HTTP and then colon / the service name, which is going to be department service in this case. So I'm going just to delete that. It's going to be / department service. Then I'm going to make a call to the department service. The department service just mimicking this one. So let me just, because I'm sure that data exists, we're going to do department SFC, then / API.to. Let me make that call. It's a GET request, and you can see it's unable to resolve that. Let's confirm HTTP colon, and then